the sheer number of dragons we've seen in the series, there are always new mysteries and plot holes to explore in the How to Train Your Dragon franchise. In today's video, we'll check out 10 fan theories from the How to Train Your Dragon universe that might completely flip our understanding of the show upside down. Starting off at number 10, here's a super interesting theory on what the actual location of the How to Train Your Dragon universe is. Fans started developing this idea right about when the first movie came out, and it was really fun to watch the arguments and analysis. Now, at first, the characters' Scottish accents led to the barbaric archipelago being compared to the Hebridean Isles of Scotland, but that doesn't quite match the weather conditions shown in the franchise. A more compelling argument is that Berk is one of the Norse islands, and the rock formations on Bear Island are almost identical to the ones we first see in the movie. Another great example is Volka's Sanctuary, which closely resembles the Norse island of Svalbard more than any Scottish island, but this theory also works since Scottish and Viking territories did overlap historically, especially in places such as the Hebridean Islands. So, while there's no confirmation at the moment, our best guess is the entire story takes place in the Svalbard archipelago, opening up interesting possibilities for the rest of the world. But from there, let's go into more conspiracy theory territory. At number 9, we have the wild fan theory that the events of the movies, Riders of Berk, and Race to the Edge never even took place. The explanation for this comes from the Nine Realms TV series and argues that Tom Cullerson invented all the stories of his ancestor Hiccup Haddock III to explain what he found in the Nine Realms. This theory would actually explain away a ton of the logical inconsistencies we see in the main franchise, such as characters from Race to the Edge never appearing in the second and third movies. Moving on to number 8, we have the theory that the ancestors of the Grimborn family were dragon scholars, and their knowledge culminated in Viggo and Riker becoming adept hunters. The strongest piece of evidence we have for this is the dragon eye, which was passed down generations of the Grimborn family and was likely invented by one of them. It's unlikely that this tool was made by dragon hunters because the lenses were hidden, suggesting that it was made to conceal dragons from all but the most dedicated researchers. The additional step of having to activate the dragon eye using fire made it even more inaccessible, hinting at it being a tool for conservation rather than hunting. But the main piece of evidence is the dragon eye has absolutely no hunting resources. It can direct you to dragons, but there's no assistance for how to take them down afterwards. We'll take a look at another theory about the Grimborns a bit later on, but at number 7, we have an idea on how the dragon hunters began using terror mail. Terror mail was first introduced by Hiccup and Fishlegs after they realized that terrible terrors always returned to their nests, making them super useful as a method of delivering messages. However, during the events of Race to the Edge, we see characters like Heather and Riker Grimborn's dragon hunters using terror mail as well. But that raises the question, how did they get a hold of the technique? The popular theory is that Trader Johann stole the concept from the Vikings of Berk and shared it with the dragon hunters. This isn't that unlikely either, since Johann frequently visited Berk and won the Vikings' trust, befriending even the likes of Stoic the Vast. Once he learned the concept from Hiccup or Fishlegs, it was just a simple matter of instructing the dragon hunters to capture a few terrible terrors before setting their plan into action. Let's move from the dragon hunters to the dragon flyers with theory number 6, which states that Krogon's Cinchtail was actually a Titan Wing. Now, some people doubt this theory since Titan Wing dragons are known to be powerful elders of their species and thus harder to tame, especially considering the fact that Krogon didn't have a relationship with his mount and controlled it with a riding crop. It's easy to argue this wasn't really a Titan Wing, but the size, strength, and sheer firepower of Krogon's Cinchtail compared to others makes it a compelling argument that it is a Titan Wing. It also makes narrative sense because Krogon was the leader of the dragon flyers. Since all of them rode Cinchtails, it's only logical that their leader should tame the Titan Wing of the species. The potential to tame Titan Wings opens up so many more possibilities for the How to Train Your Dragon universe that could potentially be explored in a spin-off. Let's take a step up from the Titan Wings to alphas with theory number 5. Bewilderbeasts have a natural form of dragon control even when they aren't alphas. The case in point here is the Berserker Bewilderbeast from Race to the Edge, which we know for certain was never an alpha. This is because Valka's Bewilderbeast was confirmed alpha at the time, but also the Berserker Bewilderbeast is a younger specimen because it's much smaller than the two seen in the second movie. But something interesting happens when Krogon tries to steal the Bewilderbeast's egg and escape her lair. She issues a cry for help, which ends up summoning every dragon on the archipelago archipelago to her assistance. So that means the Berserker Bewilderbeast did have some extent of power to control the minds of other dragons and summon them to her lair in that time of need. This theory of a natural Bewilderbeast mind control is super interesting because it undermines Toothless's authority as the alpha, but also raises questions on what it really means to rule all dragons. So far, we've looked at the Dragon Hunters, Dragon Flyers, and Riders of Berk, so let's move on to another faction from the TV show, the Berserkers. At number 4, we have a pretty dark theory that Dagger and Heather were killed by Drago Bloodfist before the events of the second movie. We know that Drago went on a path of conquest before reaching Velka's Island and eventually coming to Berk. Now the Berserkers already understood the art of capturing and riding dragons, so Drago would have seen them as a threat before he claimed the Alpha ability. This means that Drago would have approached them as potential partners in the Northern Alliance, but since we don't see the Berserker tribe in the second movie, that likely means that those negotiations fell through. But if the Berserkers opposed Drago, there's no way they were spared, and since we didn't hear from them in the Hidden World either, that probably means Dagger and Heather were probably either captured or killed by Drago. Speaking of alliances with Drago, one person we know wouldn't have been opposed to the idea is Vigo Grimborn. At number 3 on our list, we have the fan theory that Vigo was secretly working for Drago Bloodfist during the entirety of Race to the Edge. Now, first up, the motives for Vigo and Drago align perfectly because the Grimborns were the most competent dragon hunters out there, and Drago needed all the help he could get, but also the symbols on the ships and equipment used by the members of Vigo's dragon hunting operations closely match the insignias used by Drago in the second movie. This means that Vigo could have potentially assisted the rise of one of the evilest powers in the How to Train Your Dragon universe without even being alive to see its peak. Now buckle in because our final 2 entries are going to get really wild. At number 2, we have the theory that the Hidden World is connected to a wider subterranean realm similar to Hollow Earth. The strongest piece of evidence for this is that during the many seasons of Riders of Berk and Race to the Edge, we often see new dragon species popping up in caves or edges of the map. But why would dragons appear only in these locations? Given that they're flying creatures, most dragon species would probably be a frequent sight in the sky for the Vikings of Berk. However, if there's an entire Hollow Earth down there, this would explain why most dragons remain a mystery to the Vikings. They don't exist on the same plane. This would also explain the existence of seemingly isolated dragon ecosystems like the Fireworm Nest or Dramillion Island. They're not actually isolated, the connections just aren't visible above ground. But some fans have taken this theory to proper sci-fi territory, suggesting that the Hidden World extends into a parallel dimension and not just a Hollow Earth. If that theory was too fantastical for you, you'll love number 1. Here we have the incredibly realistic outlook suggesting that the dragons migrating to the Hidden World triggered an ecological collapse. Think about it, dragons aren't just some insignificant creatures, they're massive beings weighing thousands of pounds with some species like Foreverwings acting like ecosystems of their own. So what happens when all these creatures disappear from the world overnight? Think about the plants that might have relied on dragons to propagate. What about the animals whose natural predators were dragons? Without the apex predators, food chains would be flipped on their heads, and other animals would rush to assert dominance. The more you think about it, the more you realize that most of the wilderness in the barbaric archipelago would have fallen into a state of disarray. Now, given that Berk was a pretty isolated island, it's unlikely that Hiccup and the others were affected, but the loss of dragons surely disrupted the natural world elsewhere. And that concludes our top 10 theories from the How to Train Your Dragon universe. Now, click on this video right here to check out 10 more incredible theories from the franchise. Click on it to see it. Click it!